Standing before the colossal stones of Stonehenge, you can almost feel the presence of the ancients, the cool, rough surface beneath your palm, the silent, imposing weight of a structure that has watched over 4,000 years of human history unfold. But what if these stones were more than just monuments to forgotten rituals or tombs for long-lost kings? What if they were, in fact, something far more profound, vast, silent libraries, their knowledge encoded not in ink or parchment, but in the very geometry of their design? For centuries, we've marveled at the scale and mystery of megalithic sites like Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, or the sprawling alignments at Karnak, often attributing their construction to brute force or primitive superstition. Yet emerging research suggests these ancient builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and memory systems that allowed them to preserve critical knowledge across generations long before the invention of writing. This is the heart of what we call the geometry of memory, a revolutionary idea that reimagines these sites as dynamic repositories of culture, science, and spirit, designed to withstand the ravages of time through precise alignments, sacred ratios, and celestial patterns. Imagine a world without books, without hard drives, without any easy way to store the hard-won wisdom of a society. How would you ensure that your children's children remembered the movements of the stars, the turning of the seasons, the stories of creation, or the techniques for navigation and construction? Our ancestors faced this challenge head-on, and their solution was both brilliant and beautiful. They turned to the universal language of geometry. By embedding knowledge into stone-aligning structures with solstice sunrises, carving spirals that mirror galactic formations, spacing stones according to mathematical constants, they created a permanent, interactive record accessible to anyone initiated into its symbolic language. This wasn't just art or architecture, it was a high-stakes innovation in information technology, one that fused myth with mathematics and the sacred with the scientific. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to decode these ancient blueprints of memory. We'll explore how sites from the windswept plains of Salisbury to the banks of the Nile encode astonishingly precise astronomical data, how geometric patterns like the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio appear again and again across continents and cultures, and how these designs may have functioned as mnemonic devices, triggering oral traditions and rituals that kept knowledge alive. We'll ask daring questions. Did ancient builders possess a lost science of sacred geometry? Could the proportions of the Great Pyramid hold keys to advanced understanding? And what can these silent stone sentinels teach us about human ingenuity, resilience, and our deep, enduring desire to speak across the ages? By the end of this exploration, you won't just see these megalithic wonders as mysterious relics of the past, you'll see them as testaments to a forgotten chapter of human intelligence, waiting patiently for us to rediscover their secrets. So join us as we step into the shadow of the stones and begin to listen to what they have to say. Picture that Neolithic builder for a moment, not as a primitive figure straining against an impossible weight, but as a kind of architect, a knowledge keeper, carefully selecting and positioning a multi-ton slab of rock. This was not a random act of brute force. It was a deliberate placement, one calculated move in a much larger, meticulously planned design. This is the core of the geometry of memory concept, the revolutionary idea that these massive stone structures were, in fact, sophisticated information storage systems. Think of them not as simple tombs or temples, but as the hard drives of the ancient world, their data encoded not in binary code, but in angles, alignments, and precise mathematical ratios. This was a language built from the very fabric of the universe, a language of space, form, and celestial movement that could be read and understood across generations, long after spoken languages had evolved or been forgotten. Why would a culture go to such extraordinary lengths? Consider the fragility of knowledge. Oral traditions are powerful, but they are vulnerable. Stories can be forgotten, songs can fade, and crucial details about when to plant crops or how to navigate by the stars can be lost in just a few generations if they aren't constantly reinforced. A stone calendar, however, or a constellation mapped out in standing stones, is permanent. It endures wars, migrations, and the slow erosion of time. It acts as a perpetual teacher, a silent guardian of a society's most vital information. Anthropologist Lynn Kelly, in her groundbreaking work, draws fascinating parallels between these sites and the memory techniques used by indigenous cultures worldwide. She proposes that megalithic structures functioned as vast, externalized memory palaces. In this ancient memorization technique, you visualize a familiar building or journey and place the information you need to remember at specific loci or points within that mental space. Now scale that idea up to a landscape. A stone circle becomes the palace. Each stone, each post hole, each alignment is a locus. A shaman or knowledge keeper walking the circuit could physically touch each point, triggering the recall of a specific myth, a star's position, a historical event, or a complex genealogical line. The geometry itself, the spacing, the shapes, the patterns provided the cues, making the intangible tangible and the forgettable unforgettable. This transforms our entire understanding of these sites. They were not passive, they were interactive. The changing light of the solstice sun didn't just dramatically illuminate a chamber, it activated a specific part of the cultural database. The pattern of shadows cast by the stones at the equinox wasn't just a pretty light show, it was a data readout signaling the time for harvest or the start of a new season. This approach forces us to radically upgrade our estimation of ancient intellectual capabilities. It suggests a society with advanced observational skills, a deep understanding of mathematics and astronomy, and a sophisticated, formalized system for preserving and transmitting that knowledge. The builder placing that stone wasn't just a laborer. They were a librarian, carefully shelving a volume in a library meant to last for eternity. This geometric language, built from universal constants like pi or the patterns of the cosmos, could potentially transcend individual cultures, creating a framework of understanding that might be shared or independently discovered across the globe. As we turn our attention to specific sites, you'll begin to see this ingenious fusion of art, science, and spirituality etched into the very landscape, waiting patiently for us to finally learn how to read it again. Now consider the profound universality of this symbolic language. Across vast distances and seemingly isolated cultures, the same geometric patterns emerge with startling consistency. In ancient Egypt, the Great Pyramid is a masterclass in this principle. Its base perimeter divided by its height gives a value remarkably close to 2 times pi, while the proportions of its inner chambers resonate with the golden ratio, a mathematical constant found throughout nature. This was not mere architectural vanity. It was a deliberate encoding of cosmic order into stone, a belief that by mirroring the mathematics of the universe, the structure itself could become a conduit to the divine or a vessel for eternal principles. Similarly, on the Indian subcontinent, the ancient tradition of Vastu Shastra governed temple construction with an almost scientific precision. Every dimension, from the overall layout to the smallest carving, was determined by sacred geometric diagrams known as mandalas. These were not just blueprints, they were metaphysical maps designed to align the human-made structure with cosmic energies and facilitate spiritual awakening for those within. The mandala itself, a concentric diagram representing the universe, is a powerful geometric tool for meditation and focus, found in traditions from Tibetan Buddhism to Native American sand paintings. This points to a fascinating possibility that these shapes and ratios tap into something fundamental within human perception and perhaps the structure of reality itself. The circle, for instance, is a shape without beginning or end. It appears in the sun, the moon, the cycle of the seasons, and the very pupil of our eye. It is a near-universal symbol of wholeness, eternity, and unity. The spiral, seen in galaxies, hurricanes, and seashells, represents journey, growth, and evolution. It signifies a path that winds inward to a core truth or outward toward infinite expansion. Then there is the vesica piscis, the shape created by the intersection of two circles of the same radius. This simple form, rich with mathematical properties, was revered as a symbol of the intersection of the spiritual and material worlds, the moment of creation, and was even used as a proportional framework for the layout of entire cathedrals in the medieval period. Scholar Robert Lawler delves deeply into this, arguing that sacred geometry provided a bridge, a way to make intangible, abstract concepts of philosophy and spirituality tangible, visible, and therefore memorable. By giving form to the formless, our ancestors could not only contemplate these grand ideas, but could also successfully pass them down through countless generations. This transforms a megalithic site from a simple arrangement of rocks into a multidimensional textbook. Every angle, every alignment, every carved symbol becomes a chapter in a vast, silent curriculum. The geometry was the syntax of this ancient language, a syntax built on the observed laws of nature and the cosmos. When a community gathered at a stone circle designed with these principles, they weren't just attending a ceremony, they were immersing themselves in a physical manifestation of their worldview. The space itself, through its sacred proportions, would have influenced their psychology, fostering a sense of harmony, awe, and connection that made the transmission of knowledge, whether it was a creation myth, an astronomical chart, or a moral code, infinitely more powerful and enduring. The stones became teachers, and the geometry was their lesson plan, written not for a single generation but for all of humanity. Now, let's bring this concept to life with one of the most iconic structures on Earth, Stonehenge. Picture the scene on a summer solstice dawn. As the first sliver of sun breaks the horizon, its light cuts a precise path, slipping perfectly between the massive uprights of the outer Sarsen circle to strike the central altar stone. This breathtaking alignment with the heel stone is no happy accident of primitive construction. It is the crowning achievement of a profound and deliberate astronomical engineering project, a Stone Age planetarium built to last the ages. Constructed in complex phases over more than a millennium, Stonehenge is a multi-layered text written in granite and geometry. Its concentric rings from the outer bank and ditch to the inner horseshoe arrangements of blue stones and towering trilithons form a sophisticated celestial calendar, a permanent record of cosmic cycles etched into the very landscape of Salisbury Plain. The arrangement is meticulously designed to create a series of precise sightlines. These aren't just random gaps between rocks. They are carefully calibrated viewing windows that frame the risings and settings of the sun and moon at their most extreme points throughout the year, the solstices and the equinoxes. But the ambition goes even further. The station stones, set in a rectangle around the main monument, are thought to have been used to predict lunar eclipses, a phenomenon that would have held immense power and mystery for a Neolithic society. This incredible functionality led astronomer Gerald Hawkins in the 1960s to provocatively label Stonehenge a Neolithic computer. His analysis suggested that the 56 Aubrey holes encircling the monument could be used as a system to track the complex 56-year cycle of the Moon, a prehistoric algorithm made of chalk and earth. While some of his specific theories remain debated, the core idea is revolutionary. The geometry of the site itself is the software. The alignments are the code. The knowledge of seasons, essential for planting and harvest, and the timing of eclipses, crucial for ritual and social cohesion, were encoded into the permanent, immutable structure. This turned the entire site into an interactive educational tool. A shaman or elder could literally walk or initiate through the calendar, using the stones as giant mnemonic pegs. See that notch between those two lintels? When the sun sets there, we know the longest day has passed, and we must begin preparations for the harvest. The precise spacing of the stones, the subtle differences in their shapes, even the way the lintels are joined with sophisticated mortise and tenon joints, all of this geometric precision may have served a dual purpose. On one level, it ensured the structural integrity needed for the alignments to remain true across centuries. On another, deeper level, this precision itself might have been the message, representing a fundamental mathematical order or a specific mythological narrative about the creation of the world and humanity's place within the cosmic balance. The sheer scale of the endeavor reveals a society of astonishing intellectual heritage. The larger sarsen stones were dragged from quarries over 20 miles away, each weighing up to 50 tons. The smaller bluestones have a far more dramatic origin, sourced from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles distant. Transporting these stones by land and potentially by water represents a monumental logistical feat that required generations of coordinated labor, advanced understanding of leverage and transportation, and an unwavering shared purpose. This was not a project undertaken on a whim. It was a civilization's magnum opus, a testament to a worldview where the celestial and the terrestrial were intimately, inseparably linked. Stonehenge doesn't just mark time, it physically embodies the connection between heaven and earth, standing as a permanent bridge between the human community below and the cosmic order above. It challenges our modern arrogance, forcing us to abandon the notion of our ancestors as simple brutes. Instead, we must see them as keen observers, brilliant engineers, and profound philosophers who chose to write their greatest treatise not on fragile parchment, but in the enduring language of stone and sky. But to truly appreciate its role as a knowledge repository, we must move beyond its function as a tomb and examine the numbers etched into its very being. The Great Pyramid's base perimeter, when divided by twice its original height, yields a value of 3.14159, a remarkably precise approximation of the mathematical constant pi. This is no coincidence. It demonstrates a conscious, deliberate encoding of advanced mathematical understanding into the structure's fundamental proportions. Furthermore, the ratio of the sum of its two base diagonals to its height gives us the golden ratio, phi, approximately 1.618, a number revered for its appearance in natural growth patterns and its association with aesthetic harmony. This integration of profound mathematical constants suggests the pyramid was designed as a permanent, three-dimensional textbook of geometric principles. Its near-perfect alignment to true north, with an error of just 3/60ths of a single degree, reveals an equally sophisticated grasp of astronomy and geodesy, the science of measuring the Earth. This precision is so acute that it surpasses the alignment capabilities of the Paris Observatory, a structure built millennia later. Such accuracy implies the builders possessed not just observational skills, but a formalized system of knowledge regarding the planet's rotation and its place in the cosmos. Knowledge they deemed so vital it was worth immortalizing in millions of tons of limestone and granite. This leads to the compelling theories of researchers like John Anthony West, who proposed the pyramid's purpose extended far beyond a royal burial chamber. He and others have suggested it may have served as a geodetic marker, a fixed point on the globe encoding the Earth's dimensions. The pyramid's perimeter, for instance, corresponds to exactly half a nautical mile, and its location incorporates the latitude and longitude of key navigational points. Even more tantalizing is the Orion correlation theory, which posits that the arrangement of the three main Giza pyramids mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt, with the Nile River representing the Milky Way. This celestial mirroring would have transformed the entire Giza plateau into a massive star chart, a permanent record of the heavens as they appeared in a specific epoch. The pyramid's internal geometry deepens this mystery. The descending and ascending passages are aligned with specific stars, such as Alpha Draconis and Sirius, which would have been visible through them thousands of years ago, acting as sight tubes for precise astronomical observation. The king's chamber itself, built with immense granite blocks, is often analyzed for its unique acoustic properties and its dimensions, which some researchers argue are based on a precise unit of measurement found in ancient cultures across the globe, a potential standard of length derived from the Earth's rotation or circumference. When we synthesize all of this, the encoded mathematics, the celestial alignments, the precise geodetic data, we begin to see the Great Pyramid not as a static tomb, but as a dynamic, multidimensional memory system. It was a library where the books were angles and the chapters were alignments. For initiates who understood its symbolic language, a walk through its passages or a study of its proportions could reveal layers of information: a calendar, a map, a lesson in harmonic resonance, and a model of the solar system. This frozen lecture in stone was designed to be read for millennia, its message immune to the decay of papyrus or the corruption of oral retellings. It stands as the ultimate challenge to our linear view of history, a monumental question mark that pushes us to reconsider the origins of science, the interconnectedness of ancient cultures, and the breathtaking capabilities of a civilization that chose to write its greatest masterpiece not on a page, but on the very face of the planet. While the Great Pyramid stands as a testament to mathematical encoding, another ancient site, nestled in the Boyne Valley of Ireland, offers a more intimate and equally profound demonstration of this principle. Newgrange is a masterpiece of Neolithic engineering, a massive circular mound covering over an acre of land, with a long, narrow passage leading to a central cruciform chamber. But its true genius is revealed for just a few precious minutes at dawn on the days surrounding the winter solstice. After a year of darkness, a single, razor-thin beam of sunlight pierces a specially constructed opening above the entrance known as the roof box. This slot is not an accident or a later addition. It is an integral, meticulously designed feature of the original structure. For approximately 17 minutes, this shaft of light travels silently down the passageway, growing ever wider until it dramatically illuminates the entire inner chamber, its light catching the intricate spiral carvings on the back wall before retreating as quickly as it arrived. This annual event is a breathtaking feat of astronomical alignment, a precise choreography of stone and sunlight that required generations of observation to plan and execute. This was far more than a clever trick of architecture. It was a powerful physical metaphor for the most critical cosmological concept of an agricultural society: rebirth. The winter solstice marks the sun's lowest point in the sky, the shortest day and the longest night. For a community dependent on the land, this was a time of genuine anxiety. Would the sun's strength continue to wane, leading to cold and starvation, or would it be reborn? The dramatic illumination of Newgrange's inner sanctum provided a definitive, awe-inspiring answer. It was a divine reassurance enacted through stone, a guarantee that the cycle would continue, that the light would return, and that life would begin anew. This transformation of the chamber from a place of darkness and death, a tomb containing the remains of the ancestors, into a vessel flooded with life-giving light, would have been an overwhelming sensory and spiritual experience for those gathered inside. The geometry of the structure, from the precise angle of the roof box to the length and slope of the passage, served as the mechanism for this profound symbolic act, encoding the knowledge of the solar cycle into a tangible, repeatable, and unforgettable ritual. The carvings that cover many of the stones within and around Newgrange deepen this narrative of encoded knowledge. The most prevalent motif is the triple spiral, a complex and mesmerizing pattern found on the entrance stone and most famously in the end chamber, directly illuminated by the solstice sun. While their exact meaning is lost to time, these are unlikely to be mere decoration. In the context of a memory system, these spirals and concentric circles could represent a multitude of concepts: the journey of the sun, the cycles of the seasons, the path of the soul, or even a map of the cosmos. Their repetitive, intricate nature makes them ideal mnemonic devices. Tracing the path of a spiral with one's finger could trigger the recitation of a specific myth or a piece of ancestral history. Archaeologist Michael J. O'Kelly, who led the site's modern reconstruction, firmly believed this was a ritual space where the interplay of light and shadow on these carvings during the solstice would have activated storytelling, binding the community's memory to this powerful annual event. The very act of carving these symbols into the most durable material available was an act of preservation, ensuring that the triggers for these stories would outlast the storytellers themselves. The construction itself speaks volumes about the society that built it. The corbelled roof of the central chamber, where each successive layer of stone slightly overlaps the one below until they meet at the top, is a self-supporting architectural marvel that has kept the inner space completely watertight for over 5 millennia. The white quartz stones that facades the front of the mound were likely brought from a great distance, chosen for their brilliant reflective quality, which would have made the entire structure gleam in the sunlight, a dazzling beacon in the landscape. This was not the work of a primitive or simplistic culture. It was the product of a sophisticated society with a complex worldview, advanced engineering skills, a deep understanding of astronomy, and a powerful drive to create a permanent institution for preserving their most vital knowledge and beliefs. Newgrange stands as a bridge between the world of the living and the dead, between the earth and the sky, and between the fleeting nature of human memory and the eternal, cyclical memory of the cosmos itself, captured forever in a perfect moment of light. Now, let's shift our perspective from the ground to the heavens, to the field that provides perhaps the most compelling evidence for this geometric encoding of knowledge, archaeoastronomy. This is where our story truly takes flight, merging the meticulous digging of archaeology with the precise calculations of astronomy to answer a fundamental question: just how closely were our ancestors watching the sky? The answer, it turns out, is with an intensity and accuracy that can leave modern minds humbled. This isn't about finding vague patterns. It's about uncovering a precise, intentional language written in stone and aligned with the stars. Picture a learned individual, an ancient astronomer priest, spending night after night, year after year, meticulously charting the slow, graceful dance of the planets and the predictable rhythm of the stars. They note the exact point on the horizon where the sun rises on the shortest day of the year, or where the full moon crests a distant hill at its most extreme northern point. Then they direct a workforce to move multi-ton stones, not to create a wall or a roof, but to frame that specific celestial event, to capture a moment of cosmic clockwork and freeze it in granite for eternity. This scientific discipline allows us to decode these intentional alignments at famous sites across the globe. At Chichen Itza in Mexico, the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan becomes a serpent of light and shadow during the equinoxes, a dramatic display of solar alignment that draws thousands of witnesses every year. In the remote Scottish Isles, the Callanish stone circle on the Isle of Lewis is not a simple circle but a complex cruciform shape, with its central monolith and avenues of stones precisely aligned to the rising and setting of the moon during its complex 18.6-year cycle, a cycle so long it requires multiple generations of observation to fully comprehend. These are not random acts of construction, they are deliberate, carefully planned acts of recording. The geometry of the site, the angles between stones, the length of an avenue, the orientation of a passageway becomes the physical manifestation of a celestial observation. It transforms an abstract astronomical concept into something you can literally walk through and touch. The purpose of this was profoundly practical, grounding the mystical in the necessities of survival. For an agricultural society, knowing the exact date of the solstices and equinoxes wasn't a matter of academic interest, it was a matter of life and death. It dictated when to plant crops to ensure a harvest before the winter frosts, when to move herds to seasonal pastures, and when to prepare for the lean months ahead. For seafaring and trading cultures, the stars were a highway in the sky. Aligning a stone to the North Star or a significant constellation created a permanent, unchanging navigational marker on land, a fixed point from which to set a course. The Maya, with their incredibly complex calendar systems, built observatories like El Caracol at Chichen Itza. This unique, round tower features narrow, slit-like windows that are not aligned to the sun or moon, but to the extreme rising and setting points of the planet Venus. The Maya deified Venus and its cycles were intricately tied to their mythology and their scheduling of warfare and ritual. The building itself, through its geometry, became a calculator for tracking this menacing, brilliant wanderer across the sky. This level of precision, as scholar Clive Ruggles emphasizes, couldn't be achieved in a single lifetime. It required a sustained tradition of observation, a cultural commitment to recording and passing down data over centuries. The geometry of the structures served as the perfect medium for this long-term project. Unlike an oral history that might shift with each telling, or a parchment that could decay, a stone alignment, once set, would hold its data true for millennia, waiting for a culture to rediscover its purpose. It shows us a world where the sky was not a distant, indifferent void, but an active, living part of daily life, a great celestial clock, a map, and a storybook all rolled into one. The megalithic builders were the scribes, and their chosen ink was sunlight, moonlight, and the immutable angles between standing stones, creating a library where the cosmos itself was both the author and the subject. Before the written word, human knowledge was a fragile, living thing, passed from one generation to the next on the breath of storytellers and the rhythm of songs. But how do you ensure a creation myth, a detailed genealogy, or the complex navigation routes for a trading network aren't lost, distorted, or forgotten over just a few decades? The answer lies in one of humanity's oldest and most powerful cognitive technologies, the art of memory. Ancient cultures were masters of this art, developing sophisticated mnemonic systems that used rhythm, rhyme, and most importantly for our story, powerful visual and spatial cues. They understood that to remember something abstract, you must first give it a concrete form, a location, an image, a feeling. This is where the geometry of megalithic sites transitions from the astronomical to the deeply human, becoming a permanent, physical scaffold for the mind itself. Think of the most powerful memory you have. Chances are it's not a list of facts but a scene. You remember where you were, what you saw, who you were with. This reliance on spatial memory is a fundamental part of our neurology, and ancient knowledge keepers harnessed it with incredible ingenuity. They would mentally walk through a familiar landscape, a hunting path, a canyon, or even their own home, and at specific locations along this mental journey, they would place vivid, often bizarre, images representing the information they needed to recall. This technique, known today as the memory palace or method of loci, is astonishingly effective, allowing practitioners to memorize vast quantities of information with perfect accuracy. Now take that internal memory palace and project it outwards onto the physical world. Instead of imagining a familiar house, you physically build a structure with distinct, immutable points, a circle of towering stones, a series of carved pillars, a labyrinthine passage. Each stone, each post hole, each turn in the path becomes a locus, a permanent hook on which to hang a piece of cultural data. This is the groundbreaking work of anthropologist Lynn Kelly, who studied the memory techniques of indigenous Australian and other oral cultures. She realized that the vast stone arrangements and ceremonial grounds weren't just for rituals, they were the literal architecture of memory. A shaman or elder would walk the ceremonial path, and each stop at a specific, uniquely shaped stone would trigger the recitation of a specific song cycle, a chapter of a creation myth, or the properties of a medicinal plant. The symmetry and order of the geometric design provided a reliable, unchanging structure, while the rituals performed at each point layered the information with emotion, movement, and song, creating a multi-sensory imprint that was virtually impossible to forget. The labyrinth, a geometric pattern found in various forms from ancient Crete to medieval cathedrals, is a perfect example. Walking its winding, confusing path is a physical reenactment of a journey myth, the hero's descent into the underworld, the seeker's path to enlightenment. Each turn represents a challenge overcome, a lesson learned, a character met. The geometry of the path itself dictates the narrative structure, ensuring the story is told in the correct, crucial sequence every single time. This transforms our understanding of sites like Stonehenge or the complex cairns of Scotland. They were not silent and static, they were buzzing with activity and purpose. During a ceremony, the community wouldn't just be watching a performance, they would be participating in a live, interactive data retrieval system. The rising sun hitting a particular stone might cue the start of a story about a solar deity. The pattern of shadows cast at noon might indicate it was time to recite the laws of the tribe. The very act of processing between the massive stones, touching their cool, carved surfaces, created a powerful kinesthetic memory linked to the knowledge they held. This system ensured the flawless transmission of incredibly complex information across generations without a single word being written down. The stones were the prompt cards, the landscape was the stage, and the entire community were both the actors and the audience in a grand, ongoing performance of their own cultural memory. This brilliant fusion of art, utility, and neuroscience reveals that our ancestors were not just builders of monuments, but architects of the mind itself, using the eternal language of geometry to keep their stories, their science, and their very identity alive across the abyss of centuries. Now let's pull back from the grand scale of entire monuments and focus on the very building blocks of this ancient language, the specific geometric ratios themselves. Picture an architect or master builder thousands of years ago, not with a modern calculator or a steel ruler, but with a simple knotted cord, a tool known as a surveyor's rope. By stretching this rope in a specific pattern, say with knots evenly spaced to form a 3-4-5 triangle, they could generate a perfect right angle, the fundamental starting point for so much of their construction. But this act was far more than a mere technical procedure. It was a ritual, a way of imbuing a structure with a specific, sacred meaning from its very foundation. These ratios, the 3-4-5 triangle, the golden section, the perfect square, were not just convenient mathematical shortcuts. They were considered expressions of a fundamental cosmic order, the underlying grammar of the universe itself, and by building with them, our ancestors believed they were aligning their creations with the very principles of creation. The most famous of these is, of course, the golden ratio, often denoted by the Greek letter phi, approximately 1.618. This is not some arbitrary number invented by mathematicians. It is a ratio that emerges spontaneously from the natural world. You can find it in the elegant spiral of a nautilus shell, where each new chamber grows in proportion to the last by this exact ratio, creating a perfectly efficient and beautiful form. You see it in the branching of trees, the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower head, and even in the spiral arms of galaxies millions of light years away. This pervasive presence led ancient philosophers and builders to a profound conclusion. This ratio was a signature of the divine, a mathematical constant that represented ideal growth, harmony, and aesthetic perfection. When they incorporated this ratio into their designs, whether it was in the floor plan of a Greek temple like the Parthenon, the layout of the Great Pyramid's chambers, or even the spacing of the stones at Stonehenge, they weren't just making something that looked pleasing to the eye. They were encoding a fundamental truth about the nature of reality into their work. They were building a structure that felt right because it was right, resonating with the same harmonic principles that govern a seashell or a galaxy. Another profoundly symbolic shape is the vesica piscis, a deceptively simple form created when two circles of the same radius intersect so that the center of each lies on the circumference of the other. The almond-shaped area where they overlap is rich with geometric potential and was loaded with symbolic meaning across countless ancient cultures. From a purely practical standpoint, this shape generates the square and the equilateral triangle, the foundational elements of sacred architecture. But its meaning runs much deeper. The vesica was widely seen as a symbol of the intersection of the spiritual and material worlds, the moment of conception, the vulva, the doorway from one state of being to another. In Christian art, it is the frame that surrounds figures of Christ, signifying his divine nature. In earlier traditions, it represented the meeting of heaven and earth. When used in the design of a window, an archway, or the overall floor plan of a chapel, this shape wasn't just decorative. It was a constant, silent reminder to all who entered that they were crossing a threshold into a sacred space, a place designed to facilitate a connection with something greater than themselves. This is the core of what scholars like Keith Critchlow spent their lives exploring, how these geometric forms and ratios served as a visual language for conveying complex philosophical and spiritual ideas. A structure built on principles of perfect symmetry and harmonic proportion wasn't just a building. It was a three-dimensional model of a worldview that valued balance, order, and interconnection. The proportions of a tomb, for instance, might not have been random. They might have been carefully calculated to reflect beliefs about the journey of the soul after death, perhaps using ratios that symbolized rebirth or eternity, creating a physical vessel that guided the deceased according to cosmic principles. This transforms architecture from a craft into a form of poetry, where every angle and every measurement is a word in a stanza about creation, life, and the universe. The stones themselves become silent philosophers, their arranged forms speaking volumes about what a culture valued, what they feared, and what they aspired to understand. The enduring power of these sites lies not just in their mass, but in their message, a message written in the universal language of mathematics, waiting centuries for us to finally begin deciphering its profound and beautiful verse. Now consider the humble sunflower in a field, its face turned towards the sun. Look closely, and you'll see its seeds are not scattered randomly. They are arranged in a series of mesmerizing, interlocking spirals, some curving clockwise, others counterclockwise. If you were to count these spirals, you would find the numbers are almost always consecutive in a very specific sequence: 21, 34, 55, or 89. These are not random figures, they are numbers in the Fibonacci sequence, a pattern where each number is the sum of the two preceding it. This same mathematical rhythm governs the arrangement of leaves around a stem to maximize sunlight capture, the branching of trees, the curve of a nautilus shell, and even the family tree of a honeybee. It is a pattern of breathtaking efficiency and beauty, a fundamental blueprint for growth and packing that minimizes waste and maximizes strength and exposure throughout the natural world. This isn't a mere curiosity, it is a silent, pervasive law of optimal design, written into the very fabric of life itself. For ancient cultures, deeply observant and intimately connected to their environment, this pattern would not have gone unnoticed. The recurrence of these spirals and ratios in living things, in the pine cone picked up from the forest floor, the chambered shell found on the shore, the head of a wildflower, would have been seen as a signature of a divine creator or a fundamental principle of a living, growing cosmos. It represented vitality, abundance, and harmonious order. So when we find this exact same spiral, this Fibonacci pattern, meticulously carved into the entrance stone at Newgrange or echoed in the layout of stones in a forgotten circle, it is a powerful statement. It suggests a conscious decision to mirror nature's most efficient and sacred designs, to borrow the authority of the natural world and build it directly into their most enduring creations. This was far more than decoration. It was an act of sympathetic magic and profound philosophical alignment. By building according to these organic patterns, the architects were not just constructing a tomb or a temple. They were growing a stone seed, creating a structure that felt inherently alive, balanced, and connected to the universal forces of creation and renewal. This connection between the sequence and the golden ratio, often called phi, is where the mathematics become truly profound. As the Fibonacci sequence progresses, the ratio between each successive pair of numbers gets closer and closer to phi, approximately 1.618. This is the golden ratio, the same proportion celebrated by the Greeks and found in the Great Pyramid. This ratio generates the golden spiral, a curve that expands perpetually without ever changing its shape, a symbol of infinite, balanced growth. When this spiral is mapped over the face of a sunflower or the form of a galaxy, it fits perfectly. When it is applied to architecture, it creates spaces that are instinctively pleasing to the human eye, spaces that feel naturally right because they resonate with the patterns we are subconsciously surrounded by every day. The builders were likely working from a felt sense of this harmony, using ropes and pegs to physically generate these ratios and spirals through practical geometry, embedding this universal language of growth directly into the landscape. Researchers like Jane Sellers have proposed a fascinatingly practical application for this beyond the symbolic. These numerical sequences, so easily observed in nature's cycles, could have served as powerful mnemonic devices. The sequence itself, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, could be used to track time. Each number might represent a day, a lunar phase, or a year in an astronomical cycle. A storyteller or astronomer could associate each number with a specific event or piece of knowledge. using the predictable progression of the sequence as a mental filing system to ensure the correct order and timing of rituals, harvests, or narratives was preserved. The spiral carving, then, becomes a frozen representation of this counting system, a permanent visual reminder of a cyclical process. It encodes the very concept of a journey that expands and evolves over time, whether that journey is the soul's path, the sun's annual trek, or the growth of a community. The pervasive use of this pattern across continents and cultures points to a shared human recognition of a deep, underlying order to the universe, a holistic worldview that saw no separation between the mathematics of the heavens, the patterns of the earth, and the spiritual life of humanity. Geometry wasn't just a tool, it was the visible expression of a living, growing cosmos, and by building with it, our ancestors were planting their wisdom in the most fertile soil imaginable, the universal principles of life itself. Now, shift your focus from the grand celestial alignments and symbolic ratios to the very practical tools that made them possible, the standardized units of measurement. Imagine a master builder, not with a modern laser level or steel tape measure, but with a carefully crafted wooden rod or a length of knotted rope. This seemingly simple tool was the key to everything. As this individual walked the perimeter of a new stone circle, placing markers at precise intervals, they were employing a unit of length that was not invented on the spot. It was a carefully maintained standard, a measurement that would be identical to the one used by a crew building a similar monument 50 miles away, or even by a different culture 100 years later. This astonishing consistency is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a sophisticated, interconnected prehistoric world. We're not talking about rough approximations here. We're discussing a level of precision that allowed for the creation of perfect circles, complex ellipses, and precise astronomical sightlines across the landscape of ancient Europe. The most famous of these proposed units is the megalithic yard, a term given to us by the brilliant and meticulous engineer Alexander Thom. After surveying hundreds of stone circles across Britain and France with painstaking accuracy, Thom noticed something extraordinary. The dimensions of these sites were not random. They seemed to be based on a common unit of length, approximately 2.72 feet or 83 centimeters. He didn't just find this unit used once or twice. He found it and its multiples and fractions used as the fundamental building block for the vast majority of the sites he studied. This was a standardized module for construction on a continental scale, but where did this unit come from? It wasn't based on the whim of a local chieftain. Thom himself speculated it might have been derived from astronomical observations, perhaps related to the pendulum swings of a star or the sun's movement. Others have suggested it could be a fraction of the Earth's polar circumference, a notion that, if true, implies a breathtakingly advanced understanding of geodetics. This transforms the megalithic yard from a simple ruler into a potential repository of cosmic and planetary knowledge, a measurement that literally embodied a piece of the world's fundamental data. This phenomenon of a shared, meaningful unit of measurement is not isolated to Europe. Look to ancient Egypt and you find the royal cubit, a unit of about 20.6 inches, meticulously standardized using master copies made of black granite and stored in temples. The cubit was famously subdivided into 7 palms and 28 digits, numbers rich with symbolic lunar significance. Crucially, the cubit was likely derived from human proportions, the length of a forearm from elbow to fingertip, making it intuitively reproducible anywhere by anyone. This is a critical point. These ancient standards were not arbitrary. They were organically and culturally generated, often from the human body itself or from the observed cycles of the heavens. This gave them an immediate, practical utility and a deep, sacred resonance. A measurement based on your own arm or on the path of the sun across the sky is a measurement that feels inherently true, connecting everyday activity to the larger order of the cosmos. The implications of this metrological consistency are staggering. It suggests a level of organization, planning, and communication that we rarely attribute to Neolithic societies. To have a standard unit implies a need for that standard. It suggests that different building crews, perhaps separated by great distances, were working from the same blueprint or were part of a larger, cohesive cultural project. It hints at the possibility of traveling master architects, individuals who carried this standard measure with them, facilitating the spread of not just a unit of length, but an entire system of knowledge, a system of geometry, astronomy, and symbolic meaning. The use of these units allowed for the precise replication of designs, ensuring that a stone circle in Scotland and one in Brittany, France, could both accurately track the same solar event because they were built using the same mathematical language. This isn't just about building, it's about preserving and transmitting a complex world view with flawless accuracy across generations and geography. It challenges the very core of traditional historical narratives that often paint ancient cultures as isolated and primitive, instead revealing a potential web of intellectual exchange, a kind of ancient globalization of ideas, where the tape measure was as much a symbol of shared understanding as it was a tool of construction. To truly grasp the function of these ancient stone assemblies, we must shatter the modern compartmentalization that insists a structure has a single purpose. A cathedral is not just a place of prayer, it is a community hall, a school, a work of art, and a historical archive. In the same way, to label a megalithic site merely as a tomb or a temple is to see only the skeleton of a living, breathing institution. These were the hearts of their communities, multifaceted hubs designed to serve a constellation of vital human needs that were deeply intertwined. Yes, many contained the bones of the ancestors, but this was not an end in itself. It was a starting point. By physically incorporating the remains of the forebears into these geometrically precise structures, the community was making a powerful statement. The wisdom of the past is the foundation of our present and the guide to our future. The ancestors were not sealed away and forgotten. They were given a permanent seat at the table, their presence a constant, tangible link to tradition and a source of legitimacy for the knowledge encoded in the stones around them. Consider the staggering scale of a site like Carnac in Brittany, France, with its thousands of standing stones arranged in parallel rows stretching for miles across the landscape. The sheer logistical nightmare of its construction, quarrying, transporting, and erecting these monoliths speaks to a communal effort of unimaginable coordination. This was not the work of a small cult or a solitary king. It required the voluntary or organized labor of an entire society, working toward a shared goal over generations. This act of collective creation was in itself a powerful engine for social cohesion. The very process of building forged a common identity, a shared story of we who built this incredible thing together. Once completed, the site became a permanent venue for reinforcing that bond. It was a natural gathering place for seasonal festivals, markets, judicial proceedings, and rites of passage. The geometric layout would have dictated the flow of these gatherings: processional avenues for ceremonies, sacred circles for initiations, and open spaces for the entire community to assemble. The site itself, through its design, managed the crowd and choreographed the rituals, ensuring social order and cultural continuity were physically enacted with every use. Beyond social glue, these places functioned as the premier educational and scientific institutions of their day. The alignments we've discussed weren't just for a privileged few priests, they were a public curriculum in stone. A solstice sunrise at a site like Newgrange or Stonehenge was likely a communal event, a dramatic, experiential lesson in astronomy, agriculture, and theology for everyone present. The changing play of light and shadow across the precisely placed stones would have acted as a giant, interactive blackboard, demonstrating the turning of the seasons, the predictability of the cosmos, and the stories of the gods associated with these cycles. This was knowledge made visceral and unforgettable. Furthermore, the acoustic properties of these spaces are now being seriously studied. The arrangement of stones in some circles creates strange echoes, amplifies certain frequencies, or deadens outside noise. It's plausible that this was intentional, designed to enhance the power of chanting, to make a speaker's voice seem otherworldly, or to create a zone of focused silence for meditation and teaching. The geometry of the site thus engaged all the senses in the learning process, transforming abstract concepts into embodied experiences. This leads us to the compelling theories of archaeologists like Timothy Darville, who views sites like Stonehenge not as a solitary computer, but as a Neolithic Lourdes, a center of healing and spiritual regeneration. The specific geology of the blue stones, transported over immense distances from Wales, is key to this idea. Some of these stones have been found to emit unusual sonic properties when struck, potentially used in sound-based healing rituals. Others have historical associations with folk medicine and healing springs. The journey to the site itself could have been a pilgrimage, a transformative experience for the sick or the seeker. The geometric design in this context wasn't just about astronomy. It was about creating a sacred environment, a liminal space separated from the ordinary world, where the architecture itself was believed to facilitate physical and spiritual renewal. The structures served as a kind of therapeutic landscape, their order and harmony intended to restore balance to those within them. When we synthesize all these functions, ancestral veneration, social engine, open-air university, and healing sanctuary, we see these megalithic sites for what they truly were, the foundational technology of civilization. They were the hard drives that stored the operating system of a culture, its science, its laws, its stories, and its identity. They ensured that a bad harvest, a plague, or a war wouldn't cause the entire library of human knowledge to go up in flames. The data was saved in the most durable format imaginable, the landscape itself. The societal need that drove this immense investment was nothing less than the desire for immortality, not for a single individual, but for the entire culture, its worldview, and its understanding of the universe. This was a hedge against the inevitable entropy of time, a monumental bet that stone and geometry could outlast parchment, song, and human memory to speak directly to the future. Look closer beyond the awe-inspiring scale of the standing stones and the grand alignments, and you'll find a more intimate layer of this ancient language, the countless carvings etched into their very skin. These are not random scratches or idle doodles. They are petroglyphs, a sophisticated and deliberate form of inscription that turns each marked stone into a page from a prehistoric manuscript. To the untrained eye, they might appear as simple spirals, zigzags, concentric circles, or cup and ring marks, abstract art from a distant past. But when you begin to study their precise execution, their strategic placement, and their repetition across vast distances, a startling possibility emerges. We are looking at a formalized system of communication, a geometric code waiting for its Rosetta Stone. Consider the sprawling Neolithic complex of Knowth in Ireland, part of the Brú na Bóinne complex alongside Newgrange. The massive curbstones surrounding the great mounds are a veritable library of carved art. Here you find intricate, labyrinthine spirals that seem to pull the eye inward, series of nested arcs like ripples on water, and radiating lines that mimic the sun's rays. One of the most compelling interpretations is that these are not mere symbols but functional records. A sequence of dots or pits, for instance, could be a tally count, meticulously recording the passage of lunar months or even more complex metonic cycles that reconcile lunar and solar years. A spiral with its continuous winding path might graphically represent a journey, not just a physical voyage across land, but a spiritual journey into the underworld or the cyclical journey of the soul through death and rebirth. At the Alta Fjord in Norway, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, thousands of petroglyphs depict animals, hunters, and boats, but they are also filled with abstract geometric patterns like grids and lines that some researchers argue could represent star charts, territorial boundaries, or shamanic maps of the spirit world. The influential archaeologist Marija Gimbutas developed a powerful, though sometimes controversial, interpretation of this widespread symbolism. She saw in these recurring motifs the spiral, the triangle, the concentric circle, the meander, the fragments of a pervasive language of the goddess. In her view, this was not a written language in the modern sense with a direct phonetic correspondence, but a powerful symbolic lexicon shared across Old Europe. This visual language expressed a world-view centered on the cycles of nature, where themes of birth, death, and regeneration were paramount. A zigzag line might represent water or a serpent, both potent symbols of life force and energy. A concentric circle could symbolize the womb, a sacred cave, or the layers of the cosmos. The repetition of these symbols at burial sites, passage graves, and ceremonial spaces suggests they were a fundamental part of expressing core beliefs about existence itself, providing a visual liturgy for rituals that connected the community to the eternal cycles of the natural world. Beyond their symbolic meaning, these carvings almost certainly served a crucial mnemonic purpose, acting as permanent, tangible anchors for the oral traditions that were the lifeblood of these pre-literate societies. Imagine a knowledge keeper, an elder or shaman, leading a group of initiates around a stone circle. They would stop at a specific stone adorned with a unique set of carvings. The act of touching the spiral or tracing the rings with a finger would trigger the recitation of a specific story, a piece of a creation myth, or the proper rites for a specific season. The stone and its carvings became an external hard drive, an unchanging prompt that ensured the sacred narratives were recalled with perfect accuracy, in the correct order, and in their proper physical context. The placement was everything. A carving facing the rising equinox sun would be associated with a story of balance and renewal, while one hidden in a dark inner chamber might be linked to ancestors or chthonic deities. The geometry of the carving itself, with its precise number of rings or turns, could hold the key to the information, ensuring that the memory was not just stored but structured. This is where modern technology is beginning to revolutionize our ability to read these ancient messages. Standard photography often fails to capture the full depth, tool marks, and subtle details of these carvings, especially when they are weathered or lichen-covered. Advanced 3D laser scanning, however, can create hyper-detailed digital models of the stone surfaces. Researchers can then manipulate light sources in the digital replica, using raking light at different angles to highlight the subtlest of grooves and patterns that are invisible to the naked eye. This allows for precise analysis of the carving techniques, the order in which lines were made, and even the potential tools used. Furthermore, algorithmic pattern recognition software can be employed to compare motifs from sites thousands of miles apart, searching for statistically significant similarities that could indicate cultural contact or the diffusion of ideas. This technological lens is allowing us to see these carvings not as static, two-dimensional images, but as dynamic, three-dimensional artifacts of a living intellectual tradition. finally giving us the tools to begin deciphering the first chapter of humanity's oldest book, written not in ink but in stone. Envision the scene: a seasoned master, his hands calloused from a lifetime of shaping stone, stands beside a younger apprentice at the edge of a freshly cleared site. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the promise of a project that will outlive them both. The master doesn't have a parchment scroll or a detailed blueprint. His tools are a length of knotted rope, a set of carved wooden pegs, and a deep, intuitive understanding of geometric principles passed down to him. This intimate, hands-on transfer of technique was the absolute lifeblood of megalithic construction, a living chain of knowledge that connected generations and ensured that complex astronomical and mathematical wisdom could be physically manifested with astonishing accuracy. Without this robust system of mentorship, the precise alignments of Stonehenge or the perfect proportions of the Great Pyramid would have been impossible. This was education in its most fundamental and powerful form, learning by doing, where every action was a lesson and every mistake was a correction etched not in a notebook, but in misplaced stone and wasted effort. The methods they employed were brilliantly simple, yet yielded immensely sophisticated results. Consider the humble shadow stick or gnomon. By planting a vertical staff into the ground and meticulously marking the tip of its shadow throughout the day, a builder could trace a perfect east-west line, establishing true solar directions with nothing more than sunlight and patience. This foundational act of alignment was the first step in orienting an entire monument to the cosmos. For creating perfect right angles, the essential building block of so many geometric designs, they used a simple knotted rope. By stretching a rope with knots spaced in a precise 3-4-5 ratio, they could generate a perfect Pythagorean triangle, guaranteeing square corners for the grandest of temples or the most modest of homes. This technique, known as rope stretching or chord geometry, was so fundamental that it was later deified in various cultures. The Egyptian god Ptah was often depicted as a cord knotter, symbolizing the act of measuring and bringing order to the universe. These weren't just tricks of the trade, they were reproducible, demonstrable geometric truths that could be taught to anyone, anywhere, with the most basic of materials. The knowledge was literally in their hands. This process was undoubtedly embedded within a larger framework of ritual and oral tradition. The act of building was likely not separated from the spiritual and social life of the community. The knowledge of how to align a stone to the solstice sunrise was probably wrapped in a myth about a sun deity, and the process of stretching the sacred measuring cord may have been accompanied by chants or ceremonies that imbued the practical act with profound meaning. This fusion made the information far more memorable and significant. An apprentice wouldn't just be learning a dry technical skill, they would be inheriting a sacred trust, becoming a custodian of their culture's most vital connection to the cosmic order. The rhythmic cadence of a chant could help memorize a complex sequence of steps, and the symbolic story associated with a specific measurement would act as a powerful mnemonic anchor, ensuring the technique was passed on not just accurately but reverently. The astonishing consistency we see in design elements across vast distances strongly suggests this knowledge network was formalized and surprisingly widespread. The appearance of nearly identical cup and ring marks concentric circles carved into stone at sites in Scotland, Ireland, Portugal, and even elsewhere hints at a shared symbolic language or a set of standardized technical notations that transcended local tribal boundaries. This doesn't necessarily mean a single, monolithic culture spanned the continent, but it strongly implies contact, exchange, and perhaps even the existence of a class of itinerant master builders. These would have been highly respected individuals or small groups who traveled between communities, bringing with them the latest techniques in quarrying, shaping, and most importantly, the sacred geometry of alignment. They were the human vectors of innovation, ensuring that a breakthrough in astronomical observation made in one region could, over time, influence construction practices hundreds of miles away. Their presence would explain how the precise concept of the megalithic yard could be applied with such consistency from the Scottish Isles to the coast of France. This ancient model of knowledge transmission holds profound lessons for us today, in an age often overwhelmed by digital information yet starved of true wisdom. Their system prioritized deep, experiential learning over superficial information consumption. An apprentice didn't watch a video on how to erect a lintel. They felt the crushing weight of the stone, learned to listen for the telltale groan of a slipping lever, and developed a visceral understanding of physics through their own muscle and bone. It valued quality and accuracy over speed, understanding that a skill worth learning was worth spending years, even a lifetime, to master. It contextualized information, weaving practical knowledge together with story, ritual, and meaning, making it personally and culturally resonant. The endurance of these silent stone sentinels is their ultimate testament. They stand not only as monuments to the brilliance of the original architects, but as a powerful tribute to the countless unknown masters and apprentices, the human links in a chain of learning who ensured that the flame of knowledge was carefully shielded and passed on, hand to hand, generation to generation, until it could be set in stone for all time. But what if these stone circles and towering monoliths were also something far more practical, something we all rely on every day with our smartphones: a map? Not a map drawn on parchment, but a living, three-dimensional chart etched into the very landscape itself, designed to guide travelers across both land and sea. Imagine standing in the center of a stone circle on a clear, frigid night. The familiar patterns of the stars blaze overhead, a dizzying canopy of light. Then you look down at the stones surrounding you. Their arrangement is not random. It mirrors the very constellations you see above. This circle is no longer just a ritual space. It has become a celestial simulator, a permanent, ground-level reference point for navigating the vast, trackless ocean of the night sky. By memorizing which stone corresponded to which star, a navigator could use the circle as a training tool or even an emergency reference during the day, their feet tracing the patterns their eyes would later follow. This scale-invariant genius of geometry meant the map worked whether you were looking at a small model or the entire cosmos. The relationships between the points remained the same. This concept extends from the heavens down to the earthly realm. Many megalithic sites are not isolated. They are positioned with a deliberate and commanding view of the surrounding topography. A specific standing stone might be precisely aligned with a distant, uniquely shaped mountain peak, a river ford, or a sacred spring miles away. This created a system of sightlines, a network of stone waypoints across the countryside. For a people intimately connected to seasonal migration, trade, and pilgrimage, these alignments would have been as clear and functional as highway signs are to us today. A traveler would know that to reach the summer grazing grounds, they simply had to walk from one cairn to the next, always keeping the notch between two hills in line with a specific menhir. The Clover cairns in Scotland are a perfect example. While their solar alignments are profound, their prominent placement along a natural route through the landscape strongly suggests they also served as territorial markers and guides, signaling to ancient wayfarers that they were on the correct path or entering the lands of a specific tribe. The geometry of their placement encoded the safest and most efficient routes through what could often be a challenging and dangerous environment. This leads us to the more controversial yet fascinating idea of ley lines. Popularized by amateur archaeologist Alfred Watkins in the 1920s and later explored by researchers like Paul Devereux, the theory proposes that many ancient sites, from stone circles and burial mounds to old churches built on pagan grounds, fall into straight-line alignments stretching for miles across the countryside. The traditional explanation for these lays is that they represent prehistoric trade routes or pilgrimage paths, a kind of straight-track navigation system where each site served as a visual marker for the next. Devereux and others have taken this further, speculating about energy paths or currents of telluric energy within the earth that ancient cultures could somehow sense and chose to mark with their sacred structures. While the scientific evidence for these energy lines is highly disputed and often dismissed by mainstream archaeology, the sheer statistical prevalence of some of these alignments is difficult to ignore entirely. Whether explained as remembered routes, spiritual pathways, or simply the product of selective pattern seeking, the enduring appeal of the ley line theory speaks to a deep-seated intuition that our ancestors were connecting their sacred points on the landscape for a reason we have yet to fully comprehend. Whether interpreted as literal star charts, territorial signposts, or part of a more enigmatic network, this cartographic function fundamentally expands our view of megalithic genius. It reveals a society that was not only spiritually and astronomically advanced but also immensely practical. They were master surveyors and geographers who used the most durable medium available, stone and earth, to create a permanent, interactive guide to their world. This was knowledge democratized. You didn't need to be a literate elite to read these maps. You simply needed to be taught the code to understand the relationship between the stone at your feet, the mountain on the horizon, and the star overhead. In an age where our digital maps can fail with a dead battery, there is a profound lesson in this resilient, analog wisdom. It challenges us to re-engage with our own landscapes, to look beyond the screen and see the permanent markers and natural pathways that have guided humans for millennia, reminding us that the oldest and most reliable map is the one written directly onto the face of the earth. The legacy of these ancient stone masters did not vanish with the Bronze Age. Instead, their profound understanding of geometric harmony seeped into the very foundations of later civilizations, echoing through the millennia in the most revered structures of the classical and medieval world. Consider the Parthenon crowning the Acropolis in Athens. Its breathtaking beauty isn't a simple accident of aesthetics. It is a meticulous application of mathematical principles that would feel deeply familiar to a Neolithic builder. The Greeks perfected the use of entoses, a subtle curvature in the columns that counteracts the optical illusion of sagging, and employed the golden ratio throughout its proportions, creating a sense of perfect dynamic balance. This wasn't just about building a temple to Athena. It was about creating a physical manifestation of a philosophical ideal, a belief that truth, beauty, and the divine could all be expressed through the universal language of mathematics. This same reverence for geometric order is the invisible skeleton holding up the soaring vaults and ethereal stained glass of Gothic cathedrals like Chartres. The entire layout is a cosmic map, with the nave forming a sacred path, the transepts creating a cruciform shape, and the rose windows acting as intricate mandalas of light and color, designed to elevate the soul toward the heavens through sheer harmonic perfection. The master masons who built these marvels were the direct inheritors of an ancient tradition, using the same sacred geometry, the vesica piscis, the pentagram, the square and compass, to encode spiritual truths into stone, just as their megalithic predecessors had done. This continuity suggests a fascinating thread of intellectual transmission, a slow diffusion of core ideas that traveled across continents and centuries through trade routes, conquests, and the quiet migration of skilled artisans. The famous Pythagorean theorem, which states the relationship between the sides of a right triangle, is a perfect example. While the Greek philosopher Pythagoras is credited with its formal proof in the 6th century BCE, the principle itself was demonstrably understood and applied thousands of years earlier. The builders of megalithic structures routinely used a knotted rope to create perfect right angles based on the 3-4-5 triangle, a practical application of the theorem long before it had a name. It's not difficult to imagine this practical knowledge slowly filtering into the Mediterranean world, where it was then refined, formalized, and integrated into a broader system of Greek mathematics. This pattern repeats itself elsewhere. The Romans, master engineers though they were also incredible synthesizers, absorbing and adapting the knowledge of the cultures they conquered. Their vast network of aqueducts with their perfect gradients and rhythmic arches, and the breathtaking symmetry of the Pantheon's dome all speak to a deep-seated value for geometric precision that has much older roots. Even the complex, non-repeating patterns of Islamic jiri tiles, which create an infinite expression of unity and complexity, can be seen as a breathtakingly intricate evolution of the same impulse to find divine order in mathematical patterns, an impulse first given monumental form by megalithic cultures. Scholars like John Mitchell have dedicated their lives to tracing this enduring thread, arguing that a consistent system of number and proportion, a kind of perennial philosophy of geometry, connects Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid, and from there to the works of Renaissance masters like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. During the Renaissance, there was a conscious revival of classical ideals, but those ideals were themselves built upon a far more ancient foundation. Leonardo's Vitruvian Man is the ultimate symbol of this, a human figure perfectly inscribed within a circle and a square, embodying the belief that the human form and the cosmos itself were both constructed according to the same geometric and proportional rules. Michelangelo's design for the dome of St. Peter's Basilica is a direct descendant of the Pantheon, which itself descends from earlier corbelled tombs and sacred structures. This wasn't just artistic inspiration, it was the reactivation of a deep archetypal memory, a recognition that certain shapes and ratios held a timeless power to resonate with the human spirit. The enduring legacy of this geometric language speaks volumes about its universality. It suggests that the drive to find order in chaos, to represent the cosmos in microcosm, and to connect the earthly with the divine through mathematics is a fundamental, perhaps even innate, aspect of human consciousness. The megalithic builders weren't just erecting stones, they were planting a seed of an idea about harmony, connection, and eternal truth that would be nurtured, shaped, and brilliantly expressed by countless generations to come, forever shaping the course of our artistic and intellectual history. This vibrant discussion between skepticism and wonder is far from a sterile academic debate happening in dusty lecture halls. It is the very engine that drives the entire field of megalithic studies forward, forcing a constant and necessary refinement of methods and interpretations. On one side of this intellectual divide stand the mainstream archaeologists, the careful custodians of the scientific method. Their approach is one of meticulous excavation, rigorous dating, and a profound aversion to what they term archaeofantasy. From this perspective, the primary function of these ancient structures is often seen in more pragmatic terrestrial terms. A passage tomb is first and foremost a tomb. A stone circle might be a place for seasonal gatherings or a marker of tribal territory. The incredible feat of their construction is attributed to the immense social cohesion and patient, generational effort of Neolithic societies, not to lost advanced technologies or esoteric knowledge from a forgotten age. Their central critique is a powerful one. The human mind is a spectacular pattern recognition machine, but it is also prone to finding connections where none exist, a phenomenon known as apophenia. When we look at a scatter of ancient stones, we might project a complex geometric pattern onto them that the original builders never intended, simply because our modern, mathematically literate brains are primed to see such order. The alignment of a monument to a solstice sunrise might be statistically significant, but could it also be one of many possible alignments that seem compelling only because we have selected that specific celestial event to focus on? This school of thought urges extreme caution, arguing that we must first exhaust all simple, functional explanations before leaping to complex, symbolic ones. The idea that the Great Pyramid's dimensions encode pi and the golden ratio is often met with the counter-argument that these mathematical relationships could be a coincidental byproduct of the chosen slope angle and the simple measuring tools available. Challenging this cautious orthodoxy is a diverse coalition of alternative researchers, independent scholars, and interdisciplinary teams. Their work is fueled by a sense of wonder and a conviction that mainstream archaeology has prematurely closed the book on the capabilities of ancient peoples. They point to the sheer volume of the evidence, not just one or two curious alignments, but hundreds of them, documented at sites across the globe, all pointing to key solar, lunar, and stellar events. They ask a simple but profound question. What are the odds that so many monuments, built by cultures separated by oceans and millennia, would all just accidentally face the same significant points on the horizon? Proponents leverage sophisticated statistical analyses to demonstrate that many of these alignments are non-random to a degree that defies coincidence. They highlight the cross-cultural similarities in geometric motifs, the recurring spirals, circles, and specific ratios as potential evidence of a shared, or perhaps diffused, system of knowledge rather than independent invention. This camp accuses mainstream academia of sometimes possessing an almost willful blindness, a reluctance to accept data that challenges the conventional, linear narrative of human progress. They argue that this adherence to a slow, gradual development of technology and science fails to account for the breathtaking precision and conceptual sophistication embedded in these structures. For them, the geometry is the message, and it is a message that speaks of a far deeper and more nuanced understanding of the cosmos than we have traditionally credited to our ancestors. This productive tension is not a stalemate but a catalyst. It pushes both sides to adopt ever more rigorous and innovative techniques to prove their points. The skeptics demand tighter statistical models and more controlled studies. The proponents, in response, are turning to powerful new technologies to gather irrefutable evidence. High-precision 3D laser scanning can map a site down to the millimeter, revealing subtle features and alignments invisible to the naked eye. Advanced software can now run millions of simulations, reconstructing the ancient night sky with perfect accuracy to test alignment theories against the celestial patterns of 5,000 years ago, not just those of the present day. Drone photography and LiDAR surveys are revealing larger patterns in the landscape, showing how isolated monuments might be part of vast, integrated geometric networks. This isn't a war to be won, it is a dialogue to be continued. It forces us to ask deeper questions about the nature of evidence itself and how we interpret the silent legacy of the past. The megaliths do not yield their secrets easily. They stand as permanent riddles, reminding us that history is rarely a simple story, and that the truth often lies not in choosing one side over the other, but in embracing the complexity and holding space for both the solid ground of evidence and the compelling pull of imagination. Imagine a team of researchers in the damp chill of an English dawn, not with shovels and brushes, but with a tripod-mounted laser scanner that spins silently, capturing millions of data points per second to create a perfect digital twin of a weathered standing stone. This is the new frontier of archaeology, where technology is acting as a universal translator for the silent language of megalithic geometry. For centuries, interpretation relied on educated guesswork, manual measurements susceptible to error, and the limitations of the naked eye. Now we have tools that allow us to see the unseen and model the impossible, transforming speculative theories into testable, data-driven hypotheses. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, functions like a sophisticated X-ray for the Earth, sending pulses into the ground and mapping the echoes to reveal the ghostly outlines of long-buried post holes, dismantled stone circles, or intricate networks of ritual pits lying just beneath the turf. This technology has completely reshaped our understanding of sites like Stonehenge, showing it was never an isolated ring but the vibrant heart of a much larger ceremonial landscape, with processional avenues and satellite monuments that have been invisible for millennia, now suddenly revealed in crisp detail on a computer screen. The revolution continues overhead with light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, where an aircraft-mounted laser pierces dense forest canopies to map the ground surface with centimeter accuracy. In jungles of Cambodia, LiDAR unveiled the sprawling, geometrically precise megacity of Angkor Wat, while in the dense woodlands of Europe, it is revealing hundreds of previously unknown burial mounds and earthworks, proving that what we see today is often just the surviving core of a far more extensive and intentionally designed complex. This allows researchers to analyze the larger spatial relationships between sites, asking new questions about whether these monuments were connected in vast, intentional geometric patterns across the entire countryside. But perhaps the most profound tool is archaeoastronomical software. Programs like Stellarium can wind back the celestial clock with flawless precision, reconstructing the exact night sky as it appeared over a specific stone circle on a specific night 5,000 years ago. This allows us to move beyond general notions of solstice alignments to test incredibly specific theories. Did this narrow gap between two stones frame the rise of the Pleiades star cluster on a date significant to a pastoral society? Would the midwinter moon have appeared to roll along the horizon, grazing the top of that distant menhir? This software provides a definitive yes or no answer, moving the study of ancient astronomy from a field of romantic speculation into one of rigorous, verifiable science. These technologies are not just answering old questions, they are opening entirely new avenues of inquiry. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site that utterly rewrites the timeline of human civilization, digital reconstructions are being used to explore phenomena beyond sight. Researchers are employing 3D modeling and acoustic software to analyze the sonic properties of its mysterious T-shaped pillars and enclosed spaces. They've discovered that some of these enclosures possess remarkable acoustics, capable of amplifying voices, creating unsettling echoes, or even producing a phenomenon called auditory beat frequencies, a low, pulsating rumble that can alter brainwave patterns and induce states of heightened awareness or trance. This suggests the geometry of the site was designed not just for visual impact but for a full-body sensory experience, where sound was a crucial component of the ritual and memory encoding process. The very shape of the stones and their arrangement may have been intended to harness sound waves to enhance ceremonies, making the architecture itself an instrument for facilitating transcendence and cementing powerful memories through visceral auditory stimulation. The democratization of this research is another thrilling aspect of the technological leap. Initiatives like the Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes project and the resulting 3D models available online allow anyone with an internet connection to take a virtual walk among the stones, to manipulate the structures, and to examine the carvings from angles that would be impossible in person. This breaks down barriers, enabling a global community of scholars and enthusiasts to collaborate and contribute to the decoding process. The next great insight might come from an amateur astronomer in Japan or a software engineer in California running a new algorithm on publicly available data. And this points to the next great frontier, artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms are now being trained to scour vast datasets of carvings and motifs from sites across continents, searching for subtle, repetitive patterns that are too complex for the human brain to consistently recognize. An AI might one day identify a universal symbolic language, a recurring geometric cipher that connects the spiral in Ireland to the zigzag in Turkey, finally cracking the code of these ancient messages. We are standing at an extraordinary crossroads where the most advanced expressions of our own intelligence are being tuned to listen for the whispers of a different kind of genius, one that chose to write its deepest secrets not in words, but in the enduring angles of stone, waiting millennia for us to develop the tools to finally hear what they have been saying all along. Now let's step inside the mind of an ancient visitor to one of these sites and consider the profound psychological experience they were designed to create. It's a feeling you might recognize yourself, even in a modern context, the sudden hush and sense of awe that falls over you when you walk into a vast, dimly lit cathedral, or the strange clarity and focus that can arise when standing in the center of a stone circle. This is not a random emotional response. It is the deliberate result of environmental psychology, a field of study that confirms what ancient builders seem to have intuitively understood millennia ago. The geometry of a space directly shapes our mental and emotional states. These builders were not just architects of stone, they were architects of consciousness, carefully crafting environments that would predispose visitors to feelings of reverence, focus, and heightened receptivity, making them the perfect vessels for receiving and retaining sacred knowledge. The key lies in how our brains process the spaces around us. Modern studies in environmental psychology have shown that ordered, symmetrical, and proportionally balanced environments significantly reduce cognitive load. In simple terms, a chaotic, cluttered, or disordered space forces your brain to work overtime to process all the visual noise, leaving fewer mental resources for focus, learning, or deep contemplation. Conversely, a space designed with clear, harmonic geometry, like the repeating arches of a Gothic nave or the perfect concentric circles of a henge, is instantly comprehensible to our pattern-seeking minds. This sense of visual order is calming. It signals safety and predictability, allowing the brain to relax its defensive vigilance and open itself up to deeper processing. This is the foundational principle behind the memory palace technique, and these megalithic sites were the ultimate externalized memory palaces. The predictable, rhythmic arrangement of stones created a low-stress, high-clarity environment where complex information could be laid out in a logical, spatial sequence, making it dramatically easier to encode and later recall. Beyond just reducing cognitive strain, the specific geometries employed are believed to trigger deeper, almost primal emotional and physiological responses. The use of sacred ratios like the golden section or the consistent repetition of certain shapes taps into a phenomenon known as neuroarchitecture, which explores how architectural forms influence brain activity. For instance, spaces with high ceilings and expansive views have been shown to stimulate feelings of freedom and creativity, while more enclosed, womb-like spaces can promote introspection and a sense of security. The builders of passage tombs like Newgrange mastered this contrast perfectly. The long, narrow, dark passage builds a sense of anticipation and compression, making the eventual explosion of light into the vast, domed inner chamber an overwhelmingly powerful experience of release and revelation. This wasn't just a light show, it was a carefully orchestrated psychological journey designed to imprint the moment and its associated meanings rebirth, the triumph of light over darkness directly onto the participant's psyche with unforgettable force. This leads us to the powerful role of repetitive pattern and ritual. The intricate spirals, zigzags, and concentric circles carved into the stones at sites like Noth or Douth were more than just symbols to be decoded. They were visual tools for altering consciousness. Gazing at these complex, repetitive patterns can induce a mild trance state, slowing brainwave patterns and promoting a meditative, hyper-focused awareness. In this state, the critical, analytical part of the mind quietens, and the more receptive, intuitive, and imaginative faculties take over. This is the ideal mental state for the deep internalization of stories, laws, and spiritual teachings. During a ritual, as participants chanted and moved in procession around these carved stones, the combination of rhythmic movement, rhythmic sound, and rhythmic visual patterns would have created a powerful multi-sensory feedback loop, locking the experience and the information it carried into long-term memory. The geometry facilitated a form of immersive, embodied learning that is far more potent than passive listening. The ultimate psychological effect these spaces aimed for was transcendence, the feeling of connection to something far greater than oneself. The immense scale of the stones humbles the individual, while the precise alignments with the cosmos create a tangible bridge between the human and the divine. Standing in a space that you know was designed to capture a specific ray of sunlight on a specific day creates a powerful sense of participating in a grand cosmic order. This feeling of awe is not just spiritual, it has measurable cognitive benefits promoting curiosity, critical thinking, and a more integrated sense of self. The ancient builders, through their genius for geometric design, created machines for generating awe. They understood that to make wisdom stick, it couldn't just be taught. It had to be felt in the bones, seen with the eyes, and experienced as a profound emotional truth. This holistic approach to knowledge transmission, which seamlessly wove together environment, psychology, and ritual, challenges our modern, often sterile, methods of education and suggests that the most enduring lessons are those that engage the whole human being. Now, let's embark on a global journey, stepping back from individual sites to witness a breathtaking pattern emerging across the entire planet. From the remote, windswept solitude of Easter Island to the dense, vibrant landscapes of India, a common architectural language seems to have been spoken, one built not of words but of earth and stone. Consider the imposing moe, those colossal stone sentinels gazing inland with an almost palpable intensity. While unique in their monolithic form, they share a profound kinship with the standing menhirs of Karnak in France and the vast fields of dolmen stone table tombs scattered across the Korean peninsula and the Indian state of Kerala. These structures, separated by tens of thousands of miles of ocean and continent, were all born from a shared, monumental impulse to reshape the landscape on a grand scale for a purpose that transcended mere shelter. This isn't just a coincidence of form, it's a convergence of function. Each of these sites required a staggering communal effort, implying a powerful, shared social purpose. They served as focal points for ceremony, as anchors for collective memory, and as permanent statements of identity etched into the very bedrock of a culture. The parallel is so striking it forces a fundamental question upon us. Did this idea spring up independently in isolated pockets of humanity, or does it point to a deeper, more interconnected ancient world than we've previously dared to imagine? The evidence for this shared language goes far beyond just the act of erecting big stones. When we examine the finer details, the similarities become even more compelling. Look at the carving styles, the intricate spiral motifs that adorn the stones of Newgrange in Ireland find an eerie echo in the petroglyphs of the American Southwest and even in some of the art associated with the Moai. The use of pecking and grinding techniques to create these symbols suggests a common technological approach to inscribing meaning onto stone. More profoundly, we see a worldwide obsession with alignment and orientation. The same fascination that drove the builders of Stonehenge to track the solstice sun is evident in the design of the Mnajdra temple in Malta, where the lower temple's doorway perfectly frames the rising sun during the equinoxes. In the ancient city of Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the Calasasaya temple is a precise rectangular enclosure aligned to celestial north, its gateways functioning as astronomical sightlines. This global repetition of aligning structures to the sun, moon, and stars suggests a universal human response to the cosmos, a shared desire to map the heavens onto the earth, to create a fixed terrestrial order that mirrored the perceived divine order above. Geometry provided the perfect vocabulary for this project, offering a set of universal, reproducible rules that could be applied anywhere on the globe. This remarkable parallelism has sparked one of the most vibrant debates in archaeology and history. On one side are the proponents of independent innovation, championed by most mainstream academics. This school of thought, often called polygenesis, argues that different human societies, when they reach a certain level of social and technological complexity, will naturally arrive at similar solutions to universal human problems. The need to bury the dead with reverence, to mark territory, to create communal spaces for ritual, and to understand the cycles of nature are challenges faced by all developing cultures. In this view, the megalith is simply the most logical and durable answer to these needs, an idea whose time had come in multiple places at once. The similarities are then seen as a testament to the shared cognitive hardware of humanity, proof that we are all wired to think in symbolic terms, to seek patterns, and to express our place in the universe through monumental art. The slight variations in style, the distinct faces of the Moai versus the abstract forms of European menhirs, are cited as evidence of local cultural expression, supporting the idea of separate development. Challenging this perspective are researchers like Graham Hancock and others who explore the possibilities of ancient transoceanic contact and the legacy of a lost, sophisticated progenitor culture. Their speculation, often grouped under the term diffusionism, points to the sheer specificity of some shared geometric and astronomical knowledge. They ask whether it is more plausible that dozens of cultures independently discovered the same complex astronomical cycles, the same preferences for the golden ratio in design, and the same construction techniques for moving multi-ton stones. The alternative theory proposes a forgotten chapter in human history where a seafaring civilization or a network of interconnected cultures spread a core system of knowledge, a master blueprint of sacred geometry and sky wisdom across the globe before vanishing into prehistory, leaving behind only these stone clues. While this view is often criticized for a lack of direct archaeological evidence like shipwrecks or intermediary sites, its proponents argue that the megaliths themselves are the evidence, and that we have been overlooking their message because it doesn't fit our conventional timeline. This debate is far from settled, and it pushes both sides to dig deeper, to look closer, and to remain open to the possibility that the human story is older and more complex than our textbooks currently allow. Perhaps the most profound truth revealed by this global comparison lies not in proving one theory over another, but in understanding the shared human impulses that these stones represent. Whether through independent genius or ancient connection, these sites speak to universal needs: the need to create meaning in a vast and often incomprehensible universe, the need to forge a collective identity that outlives the individual, and the desperate, beautiful need to speak across time. The moai, the dolmen, the menhir, the pyramid, they are all manifestations of a deep-seated human desire to leave a permanent mark, to shout into the future, "We were here." This is what we knew, this is what we valued. The choice of geometry as the medium for this message is perhaps the most telling part of all. It suggests that our ancestors recognized mathematics and astronomy as the only truly universal languages, constants in a changing world that could be understood by anyone, anywhere, who learned to read the stars and measure the earth. By examining this global tapestry of stone, we don't just learn about ancient building techniques. We learn about the timeless aspirations of the human spirit, forever striving to bridge the gap between the earthly and the eternal, using the most durable ink they could find, the very planet itself. But the stones themselves were only half of the system. They were the hardware, the permanent, unchanging framework. The software, the living data that brought the entire structure to life, was the ritual and ceremony performed within it. Imagine the air thick with wood smoke and the low, resonant hum of chanting voices as the entire community gathers within the stone circle at dawn on the solstice. This isn't a passive audience watching a performance. It is a collective participant in a powerful, multi-sensory act of memory retrieval. The carefully engineered geometry of the site provides the stage and the script, but the people, through their prescribed movements, songs, and stories, are the actors who activate its meaning. A procession moving single file along a pathway aligned to the rising sun physically reenacts the sun's journey across the sky, embodying the myth of a solar deity's daily triumph over darkness. A dance performed in a tight, clockwise spiral within the central ring might physically mimic the carved spirals on the surrounding monoliths, internalizing the concept of a journey to the underworld and back, or the cyclical nature of the seasons. This is where abstract geometric concepts, the line, the circle, the spiral, are translated into tangible, kinetic experiences that engage the body, the voice, and the emotions, creating memories that are far more durable and vivid than those formed by listening alone. This process of activation turns the site into what anthropologist Victor Turner called a liminal space, a threshold zone where the normal rules of everyday life are temporarily suspended. Within the confines of the sacred circle, separated from the mundane world of hunting, cooking, and shelter, participants enter a state of heightened suggestibility and openness. The repetitive drumming, the chanting in unison, the exhaustion from prolonged dancing, all these elements work to quiet the analytical, day-to-day conscious mind and allow the more intuitive, receptive, and non-linear parts of the psyche to come to the fore. In this altered state of communal consciousness, the lessons encoded in the geometry are not just learned, they are felt as profound truths. The alignment of the stones with the heavens ceases to be a simple astronomical fact and becomes a visceral experience of connection to the cosmos. The knowledge stored there, the timing of the harvest, the names of the ancestors, the laws of the tribe, is not recalled like a list of facts but is relived and reaffirmed as a core part of cultural identity. The ritual doesn't just remind you when to plant, it makes you feel the imperative of the planting season in your bones, linking it directly to the rebirth of the sun. This ancient understanding of embodied cognition offers a powerful challenge to our modern, often sterile, approaches to education and memory. We often treat learning as a purely intellectual exercise of uploading data to the brain, prioritizing silent reading and passive listening. Yet, the megalithic model suggests that the most enduring learning is holistic, engaging the entire being. The rhythmic stamping of feet on the earth during a ceremony creates a kinesthetic memory tied to a story. The specific scent of burning herbs used only during a particular ritual creates an olfactory trigger for a complex piece of genealogical knowledge. The specific taste of a sacred food consumed only after the solstice sun strikes the altar stone creates a gustatory marker for that astronomical event. The geometry of the site provided the spatial and visual framework, and the ceremony layered it with sound, smell, taste, and movement, creating a rich, multi-threaded tapestry of memory where if one thread failed, others remained to hold the knowledge secure. We can see echoes of this powerful synergy between place, movement, and memory even in our own time. The act of walking the Stations of the Cross in a Catholic church is a ritualized procession that uses the architecture of the building to physically guide participants through a narrative, engaging the body in the story of the Passion. In secular contexts, a university's commencement ceremony is laden with ritual, the specific academic regalia, the processional march, the turning of the tassel, all designed to mark and cement the profound transition from student to graduate. These rituals work because they engage more than just our ears. They create a full-bodied experience that makes an abstract change in status concrete and memorable. The megalithic builders simply took this principle to its most monumental and sophisticated extreme, constructing entire landscapes to serve as the ultimate memory theater, where every path, stone, and alignment was a cue in a ceremony of remembering that could sustain a culture for millennia. Their genius lay in understanding that to make wisdom truly eternal, you couldn't just carve it into stone, you had to dance it into the hearts and muscles of every new generation. Now we venture into perhaps the most tantalizing and contentious question of all. Could the geometric genius behind these sites be the fragmented legacy of a civilization lost to time? A culture so advanced that its true history was erased by some forgotten global cataclysm. This is the realm where rigorous archaeology brushes shoulders with bold speculation, a frontier of history that ignites the imagination and challenges the very foundations of our understanding. Proponents of this view direct our attention to places that seem to defy conventional timelines. Look at Puma Punku in Bolivia, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex. Here you will find andesite blocks not merely stacked, but precision cut with interlocking joints, beveled edges, and drilled holes that speak of tooling technology and geometric understanding that seems to belong to a much later era. The stones are so meticulously fashioned that, as some researchers claim, they resemble modern machine shop work more than Neolithic craftsmanship. Then there is the Antikythera mechanism, a complex bronze gearwork device recovered from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck, often called the world's first analog computer. Its intricate gearing, used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses, appears suddenly in the historical record with no clear evolutionary precedent, suggesting a lineage of precise mechanical engineering that has otherwise vanished without a trace. The explanations offered for these apparent anomalies are as varied as they are controversial. The most popular narratives often draw from Plato's account of Atlantis, a sophisticated island nation supposedly swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. In this framework, the geometric consistency of megalithic sites across the globe is not a product of independent innovation or slow cultural diffusion, but the scattered fingerprints of Atlantean refugees who spread their advanced knowledge to the primitive cultures of the world before their own was utterly destroyed. An even more speculative thread suggests that this knowledge was not homegrown at all, but was bestowed upon ancient humanity by extraterrestrial visitors, a theory often dismissed by mainstream academia as lacking any tangible evidence and diminishing the stunning ingenuity of our own ancestors. A more grounded, yet still radical, hypothesis moves away from aliens and lost continents, proposing instead that the last ice age was not a period of mere survival, but a time when human cultures achieved a significant level of sophistication. According to this view, a cataclysmic event, perhaps a massive comet impact or a rapid shift in the Earth's climate around 12,000 years ago, precipitated a global flood and plunged the world into a dark age, obliterating this advanced ice age culture and reducing its survivors to a more primitive state. The geometric principles embedded in the megaliths, then, would be the enduring echoes of that lost golden age, fragments of a higher science preserved by the few who remembered and encoded into stone as a permanent, if cryptic, backup of their knowledge. The primary challenge and the core of the mainstream scientific skepticism is the notorious lack of concrete, verifiable evidence for such a civilization. Where is the infrastructure? Where are the cities, the tools, the evidence of the industry that would be required to support a global, technologically advanced culture? The traditional archaeological model, which emphasizes a gradual, linear progression from simple hunter-gatherer societies to complex agricultural states, finds no place for such an anomalous civilization in the current fossil record. Critics argue that the incredible feats of the megalithic builders can be, and are being, explained by the immense collective effort, generational patience, and brilliant, yet purely human, ingenuity of the known cultures that inhabited those regions. The precision of Puma Punku stones, they contend, can be achieved with patient stone-on-stone grinding and a deep understanding of fracture points, not necessarily with advanced machinery. The Antikythera mechanism, while astounding, is now understood by historians of technology to be a pinnacle of Hellenistic engineering, a testament to the scientific fervor of the Greek world, not an alien artifact. Yet the debate is far from settled, and it serves a profoundly important purpose. It acts as a permanent gadfly, pushing the boundaries of inquiry and forcing mainstream science to continually re-evaluate its assumptions. The very act of asking these daring questions has spurred incredible scientific advancements. The search for evidence of a proposed impact event that might have triggered the Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions around 12,800 years ago, has led to the discovery of nanodiamonds and other potential impact proxies in the geological record, evidence that is hotly debated but pushes our understanding of prehistoric climate change. The fascination with the geometric encoding of sites has driven the development of the sophisticated technologies we discussed earlier, from LiDAR to advanced astronomical software, which are now used to study all ancient cultures, not just the mysterious ones. This tension between the established narrative and the compelling "what if" is the engine of discovery. It reminds us that history is not a closed book but a dynamic field of study, and that the most exciting chapters of our past may still be waiting, not to be found in a hidden library, but to be slowly decoded from the silent, patient geometry of the stones themselves. But the choice of where to raise these colossal stones was never a matter of chance or convenience. It was a decision of profound importance, a synthesis of spiritual intuition and hard-nosed practicality that wove the sacred geometry of the structures directly into the fabric of the living earth. Imagine a team of Neolithic surveyors traversing a wild landscape, their senses attuned not just to the path of the sun, but to the feel of the ground beneath their feet, the sound of the wind through a particular valley, and the way certain hills seemed to hum with a strange, silent energy. Their selection process was a masterclass in holistic integration, where every element of the environment, from the bedrock below to the stars above, was considered an active participant in the site's ultimate purpose. This was architecture not imposed upon the landscape, but conversation with it, a dialogue that began millions of years before the first stone was ever cut. The most immediate and practical concern was geology itself. The presence of suitable building stone was an obvious prerequisite, but the relationship often went far deeper than mere proximity. In the case of Stonehenge, the smaller bluestones were transported an astonishing 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a Herculean effort that suggests the specific type of rock was non-negotiable. Why, some geologists point to the unique acoustic properties of these dolerite bluestones. When struck, they produce a distinctive, melodious ring unlike the local sarsens, a quality that may have been integral to the sonic rituals performed at the site. Elsewhere, in the Boyne Valley of Ireland, the builders of Newgrange and Noth utilized massive curbstones that were not only locally sourced but were also chosen for their dramatic, swirling quartzite veins. When the solstice sun hit these stones, they didn't just lie there inert. They glittered and blazed, actively participating in the light show and amplifying the ceremonial impact. The very ground was also a consideration. Many henges and circles are built on a foundation of gravel or chalk, substrates that are naturally free-draining. This prevented the sacred space from becoming a waterlogged bog during rituals, and just as crucially, protected the remains of the ancestors interred within from decay and desecration. The builders were thinking like engineers, selecting locations that would ensure the structural and functional integrity of their creation for millennia. Beyond the immediate building materials, the broader topography played a commanding role in siting these monuments. A hilltop location wasn't just about being closer to the heavens, it was about maximum visibility for celestial observation, providing an unobstructed horizon to track the precise rising and setting points of the sun and moon. It also transformed the site into a permanent, unchanging landmark, a fixed point of cultural identity visible for miles around, reinforcing its role as a central organizing principle for the community. Conversely, some sites embrace a more intimate relationship with the land. The stunning Callanish stone circle on the Isle of Lewis is not perched on a high hill, but sits in a natural amphitheater of low-lying hills and lochs. This bowl-like topography frames the complex dance of the moon, particularly the major lunar standstill that occurs every 18.6 years, making the celestial event feel like a dramatic performance contained within the landscape itself. The placement creates a natural theater where the audience is the community, the stage is the circle, and the lead actor is the moon. This strategic use of natural features eliminated the need to build artificial viewing platforms or walls, allowing the existing contours of the Earth to do the work of focusing attention and enhancing the spectacle. This leads us to the more enigmatic and controversial factors, the ones that push into the realm of archaeoacoustics and geomancy. Researchers like Paul Devereux have pioneered the study of how sound interacts with these ancient places. His work suggests that some sites were deliberately placed in locations with unusual acoustic properties. A particular valley might naturally amplify a specific frequency of chant or drumbeat, or a standing stone, when struck, might produce a surprising echo from a distant hillside. These sonic effects wouldn't have been seen as mere curiosities. In a pre-literate society, sound was a powerful, tangible force, a way to cleanse a space, to call spirits, or to induce altered states of consciousness during rituals. The geometry of the site, therefore, wasn't just visual, it was auditory, designed to harness the soundscape as part of its mnemonic and spiritual technology. Similarly, the concept of so-called ley lines or subtle earth energies, while often dismissed by mainstream science, speaks to an ancient intuition about the landscape. Whether these are actual measurable energies or simply perceived paths of spiritual force, the idea is that the megalithic builders could sense places of heightened vitality, confluences of underground water, intersections of geological faults, or areas with unusual magnetic readings, and chose these potent spots to amplify the power of their structures. They were tapping into the idea of the Earth as a living, breathing entity, and their monuments were acupuncture needles placed carefully at its most powerful points. This profound, holistic integration of site and structure offers a powerful lesson for our modern approach to architecture and sustainability. We often see a building site as a blank slate to be cleared, flattened, and dominated. The ancient builders saw it as a partner, a repository of existing resources, energies, and sightlines to be understood, respected, and incorporated. They practiced a form of deep sustainability, using local materials not just to reduce transport costs, but to root the building in the essence of the place. They oriented their structures to harness free energy from the sun for both practical timekeeping and spiritual ceremony. They designed with natural drainage and acoustics in mind, letting the landscape do half the work. In an age of climate crisis and resource depletion, this is not primitive superstition. It is a breathtakingly advanced form of ecological design. It challenges us to build with our environment, to listen to the genius of a place, and to create structures that don't just occupy space, but actively enhance and dialogue with the living systems around them, ensuring they endure not just as monuments, but as harmoniously integrated parts of a timeless whole. As we stand amidst the towering achievements of past research, it's thrilling to realize we are only at the beginning of this journey. The future of megalithic studies isn't about finding a single, definitive answer. It's about embracing a new era of interdisciplinary exploration, where cutting-edge technology and ancient wisdom converge to ask even more profound questions. Imagine the potential locked within the very bones of the builders themselves. Advanced DNA analysis applied to the skeletal remains found near these sites could finally unravel the human story behind the stones. Were the architects of Karnak and Stonehenge genetically linked, part of a widespread megalithic culture that shared not just ideas but ancestry? Or do their genetic fingerprints reveal a story of independent innovation, where different peoples arrived at similar geometric solutions to universal human challenges? By comparing these genetic maps with the geographic distribution of specific geometric patterns, a particular style of spiral carving, a unique astronomical alignment, we might trace the actual routes of knowledge transfer across ancient Europe and beyond, moving from speculation to a scientifically grounded narrative of human migration and cultural exchange. The tools for dating these silent sentinels are also undergoing a quiet revolution. While radiocarbon dating has been invaluable, it has its limits, especially with inorganic materials like stone. But new techniques like cosmogenic nuclide dating can analyze the very rock itself. This method measures tiny amounts of specific isotopes that accumulate on the surface of a stone once it's exposed to cosmic radiation. In practical terms, this could allow us to determine precisely when a specific monolith at Callanish was quarried and first erected, not just when organic materials were later deposited around it. This could settle long-standing debates about the sequence of construction at complex sites, revealing whether a circle was built in a single, coordinated effort or evolved over centuries, with each generation adding a new layer of geometric meaning. Furthermore, the refinement of luminescence dating techniques, which can determine when sediments were last exposed to sunlight, will help us create a much finer-grained timeline of the landscape alterations surrounding these monuments, revealing the intricate relationship between the built environment and the natural world. Perhaps the most transformative frontier lies in the digital realm. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are poised to do more than just create impressive visualizations. They offer the potential for a form of experimental archaeological testing that was previously impossible. Researchers can now build painstakingly accurate digital twins of entire sites, from the microscopic tool marks on a carving to the precise topography of the surrounding horizon. Within this virtual space, they can run countless simulations. They can remove the visual pollution of the modern world, restoring the original sightlines to distant mountains. They can wind back the celestial clock with absolute precision, testing not just obvious solstice alignments but more subtle theories. Did the shadow of one specific stone fall across a carved spiral only once every 18.6 years, marking a major lunar standstill? They can even model the acoustics of these spaces, simulating the sound of a drumbeat or a chant as it would have reverberated through the stone circle thousands of years ago, testing hypotheses about how sound and architecture combine to create immersive, psychologically powerful ritual experiences. This allows us to move from asking, "Could it have been?" to confidently demonstrating, "This is how it worked." This high-tech approach must be balanced by a deeply human one, the integration of indigenous knowledge and oral traditions. For too long, the study of these sites has been dominated by a Western scientific perspective, often overlooking the living cultural memory of the descendants of the megalithic builders. In places like the Americas, Australia, and parts of Africa, there are communities whose oral histories and ceremonial practices may hold the keys to interpreting the geometric codes of their ancestors. A petroglyph that appears as an abstract spiral to an outsider might be immediately recognizable to a knowledge keeper as a map of a dreaming track or a representation of a specific creation story. Collaborative research projects that treat indigenous elders as equal partners, not merely as sources of information, can open up entirely new hermeneutic frameworks. This isn't about replacing scientific analysis but enriching it, creating a dialogue where LiDAR data and elder testimony together build a more complete, respectful, and authentic understanding of why these places were built and how they were truly used. The greatest undiscovered site might not be a hidden circle of stones, but a forgotten story waiting in the memory of a community, ready to provide the context that makes all the geometric patterns finally click into place. The future of this field is a collaborative mosaic, piecing together insights from genetics, physics, computer science, and anthropology, all guided by a renewed respect for the profound and enduring wisdom of the past. As we conclude our exploration of the geometry of memory, it's worth pausing to truly absorb the breathtaking scale of what we've uncovered. Our ancestors, without the benefit of modern tools or written language, achieved something of staggering sophistication. They looked at the raw, unyielding material of the earth and saw more than just building blocks. They saw the potential for a permanent, interactive library. They transformed granite and limestone into a timeless language, using the universal constants of mathematics and the predictable cycles of the cosmos to encode the very essence of their culture. This was not a primitive act of superstition, but a brilliant, multi-generational project of information technology designed to outlast empires, languages, and the inevitable fade of human memory. They built their wisdom into the landscape itself, ensuring that the critical knowledge of seasons, stars, and stories would endure, silently waiting for a future generation to rediscover the key. What emerges from this journey is a radically upgraded view of ancient intelligence. These were not simple people, they were keen observers, master engineers, and profound philosophers. They possessed a deep, holistic understanding of the world that seamlessly wove together science and spirit, the practical and the sacred. The precision of their astronomical alignments reveals a mind capable of patient, meticulous observation over centuries. The complexity of their geometric designs shows an intuitive grasp of mathematical principles that we still marvel at today, and the psychological impact of their spaces demonstrates a nuanced understanding of human consciousness, of how to create environments that foster awe, focus, and deep, lasting learning. This was a form of genius expressed not in silicon chips, but in sarsen stones, a testament to the incredible versatility and resilience of the human mind when faced with the fundamental challenge of preserving its own legacy. So the next time you encounter an ancient stone, whether it's a lone standing menhir in a European field, a carved spiral on a national park hike, or even just an image of the Great Pyramid on a screen, I invite you to see it with new eyes. Don't see a crude relic or a mysterious oddity. See a page in a vast global library. See a sophisticated data storage device. See the culmination of a civilization's collective intelligence, a message carefully crafted in the most durable language our species has ever known. Each one of these sites is an open invitation to engage in a conversation across time, to wonder about the hands that shaped it and the minds that conceived its purpose. They challenge us to be more curious, more observant, and more humble about the chapters of human history that remain unwritten in our textbooks. The conversation doesn't end here. We want to hear from you. Which megalithic site captures your imagination the most? Is it the haunting solitude of Easter Island, the mathematical perfection of the Great Pyramid, or the celestial drama of Newgrange? Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Let's keep this exploration going together. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest enigmas, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most profound stories aren't always found in books. Sometimes they're standing right in front of us, written in the silent, patient, and enduring language of stone.